This episode of We Are Libertarians is brought to you by Audible.com. Enjoy one free audiobook courtesy of We Are Libertarians. Choose from more than 100,000 audiobook titles, including works by Ron Paul, Walter Block, Murray Rothbard, and the Cato Institute. Audible.com also has audio of radio and TV programs and audio versions of magazines and newspapers. You can get the Audible app on any mobile device or download the audio to your computer. Go to audibletrial.com/WAL or head to WeareLibertarians.com and find the link to get one free month of Audible today. Welcome to We Are Libertarians for this week. I am Chris Spangle, your perennial host. And then to my right is Greg Lenz, as always.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Good. And making a return visit is the brothers Peffers. So we'll start with...
We're here to stay.
We're here with... They've been in my second bedroom for like 4 weeks straight, and I can't get them to leave. There's just beard hair everywhere.
It's just my lifestyle.
So Chris, introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Chris Peffers.
And then Daniel.
Hello.
Dan or Daniel?
It doesn't matter.
I feel like since we're in the holiday season, I ought to say Daniel.
Okay. I'm not sure.
So yesterday we're sitting around. It is Black Friday, or as I like to call it, African American Friday. And we're sitting around the Thanksgiving dinner table yesterday. And my brother-in-law goes, "Yeah, you do a great Jessica impression, by the way." Jessica being my sister. And I go, "What?" I went, "Ooh?" Because on the last podcast, I did an impression of my sister that was less than flattering.
You did.
And I remember saying, I'll leave that in. I won't edit it out. She'll never hear it. Turns out the old brother-in-law played it for her because he listened to the podcast.
Oh,
wow,
my.
More fans than you thought.
But played it for my sister's mother-in-law, and she said, "Yeah, that's actually a pretty accurate description." For the win.
Wow. Wow.
So she actually thought it was kind of funny, but
I need
she's
to
like,
listen to last week's episode.
It was,
yeah.
It was
Would
really
you do
good.
it again for us?
You're always talking about various politics at the dinner table. Take off shoes when you come into my house.
It sounds a lot like your Cartman impression.
Yeah. With perhaps like more gauze in his mouth.
Yeah. Or something.
My throat. I need a...
Yeah, what's wrong with your throat?
I need a berry lozenge.
See, some people don't understand that we libertarians always talk politics at the dinner table because everything else is boring.
Breaking news, Gina's children have made a mess at the Thanksgiving dinner table.
So that's what this podcast subject's going to be.
So Gina...
Everyone tells family stories
Gina
about.
sends that, and I had to do a double take.
Me too. That is not what I thought it was.
That is a napkin ring holder. Gina forgot. She's a day behind, okay? That's our buddy Gina.
She forgot Thanksgiving.
She forgot that it was Thanksgiving, so she's currently in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner on Friday at 5 p.m., so she's roughly 27 hours late.
So it
for
just
Thanksgiving
slipped her
dinner.
mind?
No, you do it the day after, so everything cheap.
Right. Well, she did get like an 18-pound turkey for $10.
Yeah,
That's a steal.
There you go.
It might have been a steal, Greg.
Yeah,
She might. I don't know. She might have, loaded it up in her shirt.
People will believe I bought this for $10, right? Yes.
It's one of those truck bed turkeys.
So I said, "Hey, podcast at 5 o'clock tonight," which she was aware that we were podcasting tonight. But that's okay because I don't need her making the Peffers bleed in my apartment, which is probably what
No,
would
your
happen.
cats can do a fine job of that.
Yeah, Mittens, we need to talk about your behavior. You came over and you sat on Chris Peffers, and then as soon as he started petting you, you apparently decided that it was time to bite him. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Quality.
Don't backtalk me, young lady.
Quality airtime here.
Yeah.
Well,
This is
Cats are stupid.
so we really need to have a podcast. Get it?
I'm shocked.
It's not really
I
a
don't
pun
get it.
because there's no real tie to reality. You're just saying podcast with the word cats in it.
I know. That's why it's funny.
No, it's not.
Don't
It's not
you-
a pun because it has nothing to do with cats.
it's not really a joke.
I thought it was hilarious. But then I
Yeah.
think everything I say is
Objectively,
hilarious.
no.
You watch Whitney, so
That show hasn't been on for months.
There's a reason why it hasn't been on for months.
You know how I know you're gay? Because you watch Whitney.
That was an alright show. There's been worse, like Neighbors. That show's pretty terrible, and yet it got renewed for a second season.
You seem to know a lot about terrible television.
I do. That's what I like to watch.
What's your opinion on According to Jim?
According to Jim, what is this, 2004?
It's my favorite terrible TV show, though. I just can't figure out why I'm so drawn to it, but it's the worst.
Because he's a good voice actor.
There are shows like that are just really not that great, or they're like Everybody Loves Raymond is the same type of show. It's just the same formula. Like the Tim Allen show on right now is exactly like Home Improvement. It's just he works at a sporting goods store.
And he has 3 daughters instead of 3 boys.
3 boys, yeah.
I disagree. You shouldn't watch that TV. I mean, even if you have nothing else to watch, there's always a show about Nazis or pawn shops.
There's always an episode of Cops on.
Are you sweating? Speaking of, you guest hosted or guest contributed to the Obsessive Viewer podcast this last week.
I'm trying not to let that be known, Greg.
How
Thanks
was
a
that?
lot.
How was that?
I still haven't washed the nerd off of me.
Really?
Yeah. No.
What is this?
This is the Obsessive Viewer with our friend Matt Hurt and Tiny Ramian, yeah. And then another guy, Michael White.
Mike White. Yeah.
And I guest hosted...
They sound like close friends.
Yeah. Well, they're friends of Greg's. I was granting them an interview because everyone knows what a big deal it is to have a D-list libertarian podcast celebrity
I don't
on.
know if you knew this.
D-list libertarians. So
Chris Spangle,
in the
kind of a big deal.
D-list in the libertarian podcast community, okay? So,
man, Tom Woods the only one occupying the A-list right now. Tom Woods and Peter
pretty
Schiff.
much, yeah. Maybe Lou Rockwell is A-list.
Lou Rockwell has a podcast.
You're a libertarian,
What?
and you're on a podcast, and you didn't know Lou Rockwell had a podcast.
Lou Rockwell has this free method of getting his ideas out.
I knew he had a website.
Well, I mean, you tune into the Lou Rockwell podcast, and it's seriously like. You're gonna cry yourself to sleep, or you're going to commit suicide 4 minutes after because it's all over. But it's not the happiest podcast in the world. Yeah. Well, one of those? That's all there is. This is the only libertarian podcast that might actually make you smile in between.
You've never listened to the Tom Woods show, have you?
Listen, Tom Woods does a great podcast, and we had the good fortune of interviewing Tom Woods, which all of you should have listened to, right?
Yeah, I've listened
Greg.
to it.
I didn't.
Greg's fired.
I was in charge of the gotcha questions on that podcast, and I think, to my knowledge, Ripley bailed on asking them, so I didn't go ahead and listen since I wasn't represented fairly.
That's right. So
I demand equality, Peffers. I demand it.
I thought you were going to be here, but
Yeah.
here I am. Early morning at Spangle's house, and there's no Greg.
No Greg. I know. It's the first time it's the first time in 2013 I had podcasted without Greg Lenz.
Well, that's not true. I don't do any of the interviews because I'm kind of like the loose cannon. They don't know what I'm going to ask, so they don't exactly let me talk to them.
Yeah. So we had to keep him several miles away from Julie Borowski.
Well, how you doing, Julie?
Oh, my. Well, you know what? It's the holidays, and I don't feel like... I haven't honestly paid attention to the news, and I know I say this at the beginning of every podcast lately, but I've been extremely busy. I'm switching jobs. I'm leaving the Englehart Group and the Advocates for Self-Government, and I have a job with the Bob and Tom Show as their new web guy. And so I'm in the middle of switching jobs, and I have not paid attention to a single news story. So I am praying that one of the three of you knows what's going on.
Well,
not all at once now. Not all at once.
The Daily Show was off this week, so
you're out.
Yeah, I'm just gone.
I read for about 3 or 4 hours this week.
Swisher Sweets, if they could just, in the inside of their leaves, if they could just write out what's going on in the news, Chris, you might be able...
What? You lose most of anything you smoke out of a Swisher Sweet.
I know, but...
That's a bad idea for anyone wanting to smoke anything.
out of a Swisher Sweet.
We're walking in last night from my sister's house, and we're walking inside, and my wife goes, "Man, somebody's smoking Swisher Sweets." I go, what the? Where?
No one smokes Swisher Sweets.
It's like, how do you?
No, people who just turned 18 smoke Swisher Sweets.
Right. I was like, "Honey, let me ask you a question. How do you know what Swisher Sweets are?" And she's like, "I went to the club." I'm like, oh my.
Well, it was Thanksgiving yesterday.
Right.
Should we talk about Thanksgiving?
Big news. There was a holiday yesterday.
There was a holiday yesterday.
Today is Black Friday, and I feel like being a curmudgeon. Let's talk about the opening on Thanksgiving. Capitalism or just being a bad neighbor?
Well, the funny thing is, Black Friday is a made-up phenomena anyway.
Sure. And the whole point of these 2 days, honestly, the focus has gone from Thanksgiving to consuming. I mean, it's basically it's consuming food and then consuming as many goods as possible.
It's always been a consumption holiday.
Yeah, was it?
Right.
That's what holidays are.
Why
really.
do you all hate job creation?
No, I think it's fine. Let them do what they want.
Do you guys have a
Let them
problem?
eat cake.
It was nice. I got to cash my paycheck at Walmart on Thanksgiving, so I was
Nice.
You
happy.
bank at Walmart?
I don't bank at Walmart.
Listen, it's still better than
just
check
get
it into
cash.
cash.
Hey, I'm not judging. I just didn't know people banked at Walmart.
I don't.
Some people.
I guess I cash my check.
You've
at
never
Walmart.
been broke before,
I like
have you?
cash.
Like never been truly
I
broke
have.
before.
I have been so broke I had to sell things to get back to Indiana.
Like his body.
I tried, didn't work.
He got 3/4 of a tank of gas for selling his body.
Yeah.
Man, at least you should have managed to get the full tank. You know,
I know.
Anybody willing to pay 3/4 of a tank? Will
Yeah,
pay
but he
a
wasn't
full
ready
tank.
to do it in the butt.
I'm classy.
All right, so
Only hand stuff.
said the truck driver.
Oh,
I wondered how I knew him before. Well,
He shook your hand and you knew.
I knew I'll know those tapping shoes anywhere.
wait a minute.
Well, happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, aren't they
That
all
was We
glad
Are
they tuned in?
Libertarians.
Should we cover like the communalism of the first Plymouth colony or no?
We'll get there, but I want to bitch like an old man first. But let me ask you guys first. So, I personally, I don't like that. I get that people have to work on Thanksgiving because there are essential services, but I don't have a problem with there being some days that are just everybody just in society agrees. Let's all just take a day off and go visit our family. Doesn't have to be your blood family. Not everybody likes their blood family, but they have created their own family, you know, and you spend time during the holidays with the ones that you love. You take it a little bit easy. We all take it slower once it gets colder here. And I just feel like if these stores are opening on Thanksgiving, it doesn't mean that you have to go. Because there are a lot of people that are getting fired because they have to go to work and they don't want to, and they just take a stand. Like, I just feel there are some days that we don't need to go buy more crap. You know, and when the Pope was ranting about capitalism and all that, he wasn't ranting about capitalism. He was ranting about Americans who have more crap than they'll ever need on the face of the planet going around and beating people up for a television. That's what he was talking about. More than just all capitalism is bad, but
Have you seen some of the doorbusters?
I know exactly.
And I haven't really heard of anyone getting hurt this year.
Ooh, follow Anonymous News on Twitter. There was a stabbing at Walmart in Newport, Kentucky last night.
There
in
was
the
a
neck.
shooting at Kohl's.
I don't know. Have you been to Newport, Kentucky?
I feel like if there's a stabbing or a shooting,
it's right across the river from Cincinnati. It's it's a pretty densely populated area. There's probably stabbings at Walmart during other times of the year.
yeah, I feel like if there's a stabbing or a shooting at Black Friday, like those people are going to stab or shoot someone somewhere.
Go to Black
It's
Friday.
just coincidence.
Go to blackfridaydeathcount.com, and they'll keep you updated on who's been murdered.
I don't know. I only think it's legitimate if it's like somebody got trampled to death. Yeah, that was definitely due to Black Friday if somebody was trampled to death. But
I just
shooting. Nah.
I put this up on Facebook a couple weeks ago. It's like, you know what? Don't go. Be a good neighbor. Be neighborly. And if we don't go and we don't buy and we don't spend money and we don't make this a thing, then in the next couple of years, all these retailers won't open on Thanksgiving. And I get that people like to go shopping. My wife's been shopping all day with her mom, and it's a family event, but it doesn't have to be that way on Thanksgiving. There can be one day. And then I got called a socialist, and I'm anti-capitalism, which is not true, which is just stupid.
But what if the person wants to work?
Yeah,
so
not everyone has Thanksgiving
bills.
plans. Even people with families don't have Thanksgiving plans all the time.
Right, and
you don't have to do Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving. It's one of the more flexible holidays, I'd argue.
Right.
Just do it whenever.
But that's for every individual that you find that wants to work on Thanksgiving, I will find one that doesn't.
Well, granted, but I think that this is just something that'll fix itself. I mean, honestly, do you think that they're really making a lot of money by giving away pretty much free merchandise on a day that's not even the biggest shopping day of the year? I mean, that whole bit's a myth.
Well, for instance, okay, I did voluntarily go to work today, and I woke up at like 4 a.m., and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at Facebook, and a guy who works at a tire store is lamenting the fact that he's been open for 4 hours, and nobody's come in to buy tires at 5:30 a.m. I checked back in about noon, and he was like, yep, nobody wanted tires today. Last night, as we were driving home at 6 p.m., Petco was open. Why the hell do I need to go to Petco on Thanksgiving night?
Oh, exactly. It's a bubble. Eventually, the bubble will pop when people realize that they're not making money by staying open on Thanksgiving, and the hysteria will end.
Right.
There will still be doorbusters. It'll be like back when we were kids, where the doorbusters were more of a mild...
6 a.m. Friday.
Yeah, 6 a.m. Friday,
And think how much money those homeless people make that people pay to stand in line and reserve their spots.
Yeah.
I mean, I
always the job creator, Greg.
Hey, I'm just saying, I think it's a good... I don't think it's a bad
crowds
thing.
are great for panhandlers.
Yeah.
I mean...
Captive audience.
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if you want to go to work, I don't think it's one of those things you should be required or you'll be fired. But if you want to, I do like it that it is available if you need the money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and just think the homeless people can just look at them and say, "Oh, come on, you're here to buy an Xbox with cash and you don't have spare change."
What?
There's actually a market solution. Create a temporary employment agency that exists just once a year for people who need the extra holiday money. And you essentially deploy your temporary workers to the stores that want to stay open.
I've got it.
So it's like organized scalping tickets.
Exactly.
Okay.
How about we get the local high schools to open up their gymnasium, and then you have a catalog sale? I've got it solved for the people that want to work and the stores that want to be open.
What this is
I don't
solving.
know.
I'm not understanding this. Like, are you trying to go on a band trip and you're trying to sell...
This sounds
Exactly.
like the least relevant
Bake
plan
sale?
I've ever heard, ever.
Listen, I'm a big thinker, okay?
Why don't we just start a car wash?
That was your big thinking?
We charge $10 a car.
Sometimes my...
Tell me more about your Amway scheme.
Sometimes my
the
vision...
biggest keg party the town's ever seen. $2 a head.
Sometimes my vision gets glaucoma. Can any of you help with that? So,
Not right now.
You think it's that big a deal, though? You really... I would imagine you would get called a
Spangle's
socialist.
just such an old man.
He's such an old socialist,
I'm not one of those cranky... Like, I've listened to Christmas music for the last, 2 weeks. I enjoy the holidays, and I like seeing my family, and I don't... I'm not one of the... It's one of those things that it's like, well, I want to work. So you who have traditional values, shut up because you're an asshole. It's like, I don't know. It bothers me, but not like in a serious way.
Well, how do you feel about employment law?
Like, what do you mean?
As far as a 40-hour work week and certain holidays off?
The 40-hour work week is a myth. I mean, there are people who do work 40 hours a week, but I think anybody who's on salary knows that you some weeks work less than 40 and some weeks you work more. I mean, I'm working more than 40 hours right now, and 2 months from now I may be working 35 hours a week. I think, the 40-hour work week is a goal, but it's not necessarily achieved in this day and age.
And so many people are going into truck driving. Truck driving is never a 40-hour week job. You are only getting paid when you're driving.
Right. I think if you go into a job like if you go into a job like law enforcement. You know that there are going to be holidays that you're going to have to work because those are life and death situations. If you started working at Kohl's 10 years ago and then all of a sudden this year they came up and said you've got to work Thanksgiving, and it totally throws off your family traditions, and everybody, where you've got these family traditions that are screwed with because your job's on the line, I don't think that's cool, and I think they ought to have an option to not have to work that day. Those are the kind of things that I want everybody to do exactly what they want, but I don't know. I'm a confused man. Not sexually, but...
You were very confusing.
I know.
See, I feel like, and this is maybe just me, but like France has the hard 35-hour work week, right?
Which is why they're France.
Exactly, which is why they're France. But at the same time, I feel like, and you guys have all probably experienced it, a lot of the workday's wasted. A lot of it's non-productive time.
Yeah.
So realistically, if you were highly concentrated, highly focused for 35 hours in a work week, I think you would be just as productive as if it was
Well, it
anything
depends.
else.
A lot of the periods of productivity is based off of when customers walk in and whatnot.
I think that if you're in a white-collar job, a lot of your day is wasted. I think if you're in a blue-collar job, when I worked for my dad doing construction cleanup, there was not a lot of waste because you've got to get a certain amount of this done during the day. But if you're in a white-collar job and you work on a computer and you work in the idea factory, let me check out what's going on in the Facebook chat. Oh, Joe Ruiz is taking a picture of himself saying the Happy Twerksgiving. Let me make my own meme. So, meme.
What's that? Yeah.
So, sorry, Muser. So I think there is a lot of productivity lost in white-collar jobs.
Not so much in blue-collar, though.
Like with Chris and I's job, I mean, we're pretty much sorting packages the entire time.
Male strippers, by the way.
So are you guys glad that there is a limit on how much you can work?
Just a package sorter.
I mean, we're part-time, so, we don't reach the limit.
Okay.
So, that's kind of like a ceiling above our cap,
If you did do 40 hours, would you be happy it would be only 40 hours a week?
Yeah, I don't like the idea that the work week is capped, I don't like the idea that if you want to work part-time, you got to work less than 29 hours, It'd be a lot easier just to work all your hours at the same job instead of having several jobs.
So if you could do, let's say there was a cap of 40, but you could voluntarily take on more, would that be like the kind of policy you would like?
I'm not a big policy man. I would just say, work as many hours as you and your employer, deem necessary.
I'm an idea man. I'll let you little brains figure out all the policy stuff.
No, I just don't think policy is a really good thing to have. I'm an anarchist. Where does policy fit in with anarchy?
Yeah. So, and by no means am I saying there should be some sort of, listen, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, you're a statist because it's a government-created holiday. So you might as well just drive off a bridge.
Or are you a cannibal?
Hey, I'll take the day off plus holiday pay.
Right. Well, so there should be no law dealing with this situation. I just, for me, both my wife and I are like, we're not going to participate in this because this is silly. We'll get up, she's going shopping at 8 a.m. this morning, and like Dan said, it'll just sort of die on the vine. So,
plus that is way too early to get up and go shopping.
Yeah, no kidding. Chris,
no means no.
Chris, leave my cat alone because you are about to get a world of hurt.
She started it.
She weighs 10 pounds.
She can start too.
You're at least 103 pounds of beard.
Spangle, make a note of the time.
I will. I really feel like it's enough with the cutting out the cursing. We're all grown-ups here, right? Should we continue to
restrict your audience if you have to put that explicit sticker on the podcast?
We'll see.
Parental advisory.
It depends on how fired up
People
Gina
do.
is.
Parents do set those parental controls on iTunes.
Yeah, and we just wouldn't.
You
put
can
the
get
parental
away
tag
with
in there.
one every once in a while.
I mean, like
so you get the one.
Like
yeah,
why can't
I
have the one?
Because I called it. I just did it.
Listen, an errant I get. Like if we're, it's not that big of a deal. But like if
Great
every
band
episode,
name, Errant
yeah, if every episode we're like, punch, then maybe we'd have to deal with the language. But
I think you might need to make a note of that time.
I might. So,
Maya.
John Stewart, by the way, has been using that a lot.
Yeah.
It makes me giggle. So, Gregory.
Christopher.
Did you do homework on the first Thanksgiving?
I did.
And what it truly means?
I heard they ate lobster.
You heard they ate lobster.
That is true.
Heard that
you know
from
what,
a sitcom.
More so than the first Thanksgiving, what I really was reading about was the first Plymouth Colony and the communalism of it.
Let us all sit around the candle here and listen to Greg Lins tell us a story about the first Thanksgiving.
So the most boring people from Europe came over here on some ships and landed at Plymouth Rock.
Right.
They decided to set up a colony that was as close to Marxism as it really gets. It was pretty much two each according to their need, from each according to their ability. And the first 2 winters, people worked so little that they were basically starving.
So let me ask you, Dan Peffers, if I told you didn't have to work for a living, property rights didn't exist, and we lived in a world of James Neese fantasies here, and if you worked or you didn't work, you're going to get food. If you work or you didn't work, your shelter will be repaired. If you work or you don't work, you're going to get clothing. Does that make you more or less likely to work hard?
Canned response.
Meaning
you asked me a very pointed question.
That's right.
You expect a very specific response.
Right. And so people found themselves
sitting
around going, I'm sick today, I'll work tomorrow. Or I have to take care of the kids, I can't go out to the fields today. Or I would go over there, but I can't. And then everybody had to help each other, and then all of a sudden wives are going and helping other men, and women are getting jealous, and men are getting jealous, and there's fistfights over how much little Susie is helping Jim, and little Donna's getting mad about it. I'm sure that were their names. But so that was a makeup of the first 2 years.
And human beings are naturally scorekeepers. We very much watch how much someone's contributing to a project, even if we don't act on it. Like when you're participating in any type of group activity, I think it's only natural to observe and say, this person really isn't contributing, or this person really is going above and beyond. You can gauge that, and whenever you remove that factor, there's going to be that little bit of resentment that goes on your head when you see someone reaping the benefits that they didn't actually deserve.
I noticed you looked at Daniel when you said someone isn't contributing.
No, I didn't mean. I just wanted to see what they thought.
I was contributing, and not you.
No, I don't think that's how that works.
Oh.
Let's look at the Peffers brother, who's most likely to comment.
Let's dive right into this. So, Chris, do you feel that Dan doesn't help enough around the apartment?
Dude, don't get us into
That's exactly what I want to do.
No, this.
No. We've been so close. We were almost done with this lease. Just no major fighting.
You guys not going to live with each other anymore?
We will, but it will be at our parents' house.
Oh.
Yeah, going back home.
Why, are you saying that one of the two of you doesn't contribute enough financially?
We are not getting into this.
All right, damn it.
What is this line of questioning? I didn't realize we were discussing finances.
So we are still pleading the fifth.
I was just trying to pick a fight.
Yes, you really were.
Continue, Greg Lance.
He is a born instigator, is he not?
He really is.
Yeah. Hard to believe there's so much division in the Indiana Libertarian Party after his years of leadership.
Chris.
Like intellectual property. What do you guys think of that?
Does Dan's beard make you jealous?
Why would Daniel's beard make me jealous?
I don't know. It's more manly than yours.
I don't think it is.
I think it might be.
Daniel, do you hate Peffer's face? See, that's a trick question, Greg. All right,
That is a trick question.
Greg, continue on. Continue telling us about human nature.
Well, I don't know about human nature, but in the colonies, so this goes on for 2 years, they nearly starved to death.
One person's jealous of another person's
One
beard.
person's jealous of another person's beard. The next thing you know, there's beard redistribution.
Yeah.
His
if you
beard
don't have a
doesn't even
beard, you're
connect.
forced to wear
His
one.
mustache and beard don't connect.
My mustache is beefier.
See, we've had our own little example, a little playlet of what happened in the first Plymouth colonies.
Did you hear that sound?
What?
That was the sound of women's panties being thrown at all the speakers when we got into the beefy beard discussion. But anyway, so then the governor of the Plymouth colonies decides to assign everyone a plot of land. Everyone owns it individually. There's property rights in at the time, not the United States, but the colonies for the first time, and the next harvest is bountiful.
Right.
And it thrives.
And instead of 50% of the people dying like the first 2 years, all of a sudden everybody starts producing. They become productive members of the society, contributing to each other and helping each other, and everybody has more. They have an abundance, and because they have that abundance, they start living in harmony with each other.
Well, that's a great story, but is there a lesson?
What did we learn today, Greg?
The lesson is that even though conceptually communism and not in the absence of property rights, conceptually it makes sense, right? Ideally, you'd live in a world where no one had to worry about starvation because we'd all just work together and help each other. When you have individual property rights and self-interest is the driving force in a community, what actually ends up happening is you use the resources more productively because it's what is human nature.
You know what else was interesting is the Mayflower Compact. They were going across the ocean. They were supposed to land in Virginia, and they ended up in Massachusetts because of a storm. And so several of them said, well, the Mayflower Compact is null and void, but we'll still abide by it because we must have some sort of government. So here is a group of people who are trying to flee a government that is oppressive, and they build their own government when they don't really need a government. It's a group of how many people? A couple hundred?
Yeah, a few hundred people.
Yeah, and so you don't necessarily need a government, but isn't it weird that they
never need a government.
Right, but isn't it weird that they chose to have a government, Peffers? They forced one upon themselves?
Let's see.
They were pretty religious, so...
Yeah.
Was it, though, really a government? Or was it just mainly an agreement between individuals?
Well, if they all signed it, then they are all beholden to...
But not all signed it because women weren't allowed to sign it, and the majority of the men signed it, and it was a majoritarian rule. So it was... At what point does it become a government? Because not everybody was able to even participate in the signing of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was still government oppression. I didn't think we were taking into account the forced nature for against women in this particular circumstance, because at that time that was pretty much par for the course.
Right.
If we want to compare apples to apples, I mean that was more of an agreement than it was government.
And there wasn't
in that context, but yeah, I mean, if we're talking today, then yeah, we would have to take that into account too. Not necessarily children, but women, minorities, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a person like you that, at the time, I doubt there was any anarchist in that group of essentially people fleeing religious extremism.
I wouldn't have signed it, and I wouldn't have abided by it.
No, but I mean, had you been there, perhaps they take a different form of government.
There might have been some rebellious teenagers.
Yeah,
there might have been. Those Amish that leave when they've reached that certain age.
Yeah,
one of those guys.
Actually, it turns out Raum-Springer just means to run freely, and it's the idea of the carefreeness of youth, not necessarily a period of time where you go out into the world. Some Amish people do it, but Raum-Springer is more for like your entire childhood, and then you leave that and you become part of the Amish community.
It's hard to take a man talking about Raum-Springer with a beard that full.
Nothing says credibility on Raum-Springer like a beard like that.
All right, Yoder Peffers.
Yeah, I was at a bar with a big group of friends, and one really drunk woman asked me if we were all Amish. I'm just like, no.
You want me to be?
Could you leave the cat alone, please?
I'm just like, why would you think
causing
that?
trouble.
And well, I thought you were all Amish on Raum-Springer because you all have beards. And I look around at everybody had a beard.
To put it into perspective, Dan has the haircut and the beard of a Republican politician in 1887. So he looks like Martin
Ulysses S. Grant.
Right. Looks like he just walked right off the battlefield.
I used to have mutton chops, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
No, I've got a picture. Hold on, I'll pull out the picture.
So, Greg, how did Thanksgiving come about?
Well, they decided they're starving.
Wait a minute. Before we proceed, do you have a picture of yourself in your wallet?
Passport.
My passport
Oh,
photo.
okay. All right.
Why would you need that for? That's just government-sanctioned travel.
Yeah.
Hey, I am a rational player in a
Kinda
in a
anarchist are
market
you?
where I've got. I mean, I have a gun to my head at a lot of time in my life. You know, I gotta.
I'm just trolling, buddy.
Yeah, you are trolling.
I am
you
trolling.
really
I'm
are
not.
trolling.
So,
But yeah, last surviving photograph of me with mutton chops.
There we go. That's a good look. That's a good look.
I like the full beard better.
Yeah.
yeah, let me see. All
When I
right.
was in high school, I did the mutton chop look.
Dan's
because that
social security number is 37042.
Thank God he has LifeLock.
Yeah. Actually, for the longest time, I thought LifeLock was a scam because the initial advertising campaign was him with his Social Security number on the side of a truck. And according to the Social Security Administration, if you use a real Social Security number in any type of advertisement, standard operating procedure is that they invalidate the number immediately and reissue you one. So I thought it was a scam because...
His wasn't real.
Well, yeah, by publishing it like that, it invalidated it. But turns out it's actually a well-respected service. But
Yeah.
Cool story, bro. All right, so tell me
Says
about
the guy
Thanksgiving.
taking selfies with his cat.
Because my wife is never going to believe that Muffins was sitting here like this. So it's
my wife will not believe this.
so. Listen, we got to find things to talk about. We've been married for 2 years now. I can only hear about the Lifetime movie so many times.
Oh, hey, the client list got canceled, so no more for you.
You're kidding. Oh, when I tell her that the client list there will be mourning. There will be sackcloth and ashes, and she will tear her clothes as she weeps.
I'm just saying that's like the one tolerable thing for you that you can watch is Jennifer Love Hewitt in low-cut dresses.
Oh, and boy, were they. So, Gregory, let's get to Thanksgiving. What is the true story behind Thanksgiving?
Well, if you believe the history books, there were some Indians and some villagers, I guess the appropriate way to say.
Huh?
And they sat down at this wooden table, and everybody brought turkey and stuffing and cranberries and
Pumpkin
all
pie.
the
Green bean casserole.
Green bean casserole. It was organized on a Facebook group with their iPads.
Right.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, Diet Dr. Pepper. Everybody shook hands. It was this incredible event of celebration and
I think they were
joy.
using stevia as their sweetener as well.
Right.
you
It was sugar-free pumpkin pie.
It was sugar-free pumpkin pie without
And it-
crust.
Without
Yeah,
crust.
Without crust. And then they also had the absurd buckles on their hat.
That's
Like,
racist.
Absurd buckles on their hat.
That's racist.
That's
Why do you hate
racist.
Dutch people?
Why do I
Right.
hate... There was an advertising
Do you
campaign.
have a problem with their outfit because it was black?
Oh, wow. But the whole buckle on the hat thing was actually an advertising campaign for trying to sell belt buckles.
Nice.
Yeah, it was...
The reason that they didn't get anything done for 2 years is because they were ADHD, and all those shiny objects kept distracting them. So continue, Greg.
Well, they all sat down. They had a great meal, and we lived in harmony until that Henry Andrew Jackson came in and forced all those Indians into little, I guess, gated communities would be a nice way to put it in Arizona and Oklahoma.
Right. So what's the real story?
Realistically,
They weren't gated communities.
they weren't gated communities. We ate a few Indians. There was no such thing as that harmony that existed. We introduced disease and destruction onto their community.
What about the Squanto bit?
The Squanto bit, please inform me. I don't
Like,
know at all.
Squanto,
And
knowing-
Montessori? I
Not-
forget his Massaquoi. That's it. He was
Did
the
you just
chief.
have a stroke?
It's aphasia. No, he
verbal
he was the head of the local Indian tribe, and they came in and they helped teach them how to plant corn. Some of that's fairly true, but it wasn't necessarily like this super peaceful. The local Indians did come in and help them survive the winter because they taught them how to plant in the New World, and then Manifest Destiny came up.
People are great.
Right.
It's easy to cohabitate and introduce yourself to new groups of individuals. It's when leadership gets involved that trouble arises.
Right, when governments are formed. Let's talk about Manifest Destiny for just a bit. Manifest Destiny is really a shameful piece of American history because it takes the idea of America, the nation, and it's much like the Civil War and why libertarians have an issue with Lincoln. The entire thought was that all of the land on the continent of America belonged to the United States government, and that the Americans, the European-type folks, were able to spread across the nation, and that land belonged to them, as opposed to finding land that didn't belong to them. And it's this idea that the federal government, it was their destiny, it was written in the heavens, that they were to conquer the rest of the continent. And that is the driving force, this idea that we must forge one nation, that really was one of the drivers of the slaughter of many Native Americans. Once again, it's not individuals and not taking into account that the people who are on that land are human beings as well, and that they have a right to exist on the land, and that you two ought to cohabitate. Instead, it becomes the notion that, well, you are not one of us, so we must kill you because it is God's will. So,
and it was a clash of lifestyles.
Right.
I mean, we introduced property rights to the Native Americans. They could never understand how someone could own the land.
Right.
How could you own something that you didn't make, that had never been assigned to anyone? It was communal use for all.
Well, I think Rothbard answered that question.
Please explain it to us, because that's my next question, especially for you, Dan Peffers. How do you acquire property justly?
You have to, in order for land to be owned, it must be homesteaded, which means turned from a virgin resource to something economically productive, like a house or a farm or a mine or
right.
Yeah.
You have to find this unclaimed piece of property and make it better.
Yes, you have to improve the land, and that's how a lot of like if you watch Deadwood on HBO, they make a lot of reference to homesteading, both by name and by how they hold their claim, by holding the legitimacy of their claim by improving the land and whatnot. And basically, once you homestead the land, you now hold title to it, and the only way that that property can be transferred is by voluntary transfer of title from one hand to another, either by inheritance or by buying and selling, or what have you.
Right. So the other way of acquiring property justly is through the exchange of goods. So I give you money for a plot of land, or Greg has a cell phone. I want his cell phone. We trade. I give him money for his cell phone, or I give him money for his land. So you either find an unclaimed, and see, that's part of the agreement, and this is part of the anarchist challenge that I think Greg and I would pose to you, or to any anarchist out there, is does there have to be an agreed upon set of rules as to what is unclaimed property?
There's several ways of answering that question. Like, can one person claim the entire Colorado Rockies? I'd say no, because, you are not improving the entirety of the Colorado Rockies.
Right.
You are probably improving very narrow sections of it, and those sections you'd hold legitimate claim to, but you can't just claim the entire Earth and say, or just improve one small spot and say that the whole planet's yours.
Well, the federal government can. Why can't the United States government has? So
that is coercion. That is coercive talk.
Right.
And then there's also what happens with abandoned property, and there's there's a difference between letting a field lay fallow and abandoning it.
Right.
Laying it fallow is actually a method of maintenance on the land.
Right.
And no reasonable person can really make the argument that a farmer who lets his field lay fallow for a year or two has abandoned the property. But you can, if a grove starts growing there, and it's just like wild trees, not something productive like fruit trees that could be construed as an orchard or something. If you just have a wild grove and you just let it grow back to its natural state, then one can make the argument that that property has been abandoned and can be re-homesteaded.
Okay. So, what if I abandon, I can't say my apartment. And in modern society, it's pretty tough because we all kind of rent the land from the government anyways, thanks to property taxes. So you don't necessarily own your own land because don't pay your property taxes, and you'll see if you own your own land. Mm-hmm. So that property taxes...
Collect rainwater on your land, and
right.
When the federal government tells you that you've been stealing water from them, then you'll see who really owns your land.
Right. Homeowners associations, I have less of a problem with those covenants because it is voluntary. You move in, you realize that you can't put a pool in the yard. You know that when you're going into buying into that neighborhood.
HOA is a little bit different circumstance. It's all through private contracts.
Right, a covenant.
Yeah, it's. I've heard of some municipalities requiring that every subdivision become have an HOA, and I don't agree with that. But
right.
There's nothing inherently wrong with an HOA. That is a private contract.
Right, because you choose to live there or not.
Now, one thing, though, is if you inherit the land from somebody who signed that HOA agreement and you did not, I wonder how that would work in a libertarian regard.
Well, you could choose to sell the property or not.
If you inherit the land, it's your property, but you never signed any agreement.
Right.
So I'm just interested in it because they sell you the land on the condition that you meet these circumstances, and if the land becomes your property without you signing that agreement, I wonder if that actually would apply to you morally.
Is homesteading valid? Do you find that valid?
I find it to be a valid argument.
Yeah.
And you've got kind of a smirk, like you're going.
No, I haven't given. No, honestly,
you're gonna just hit me with a real stumper of a question.
No, I haven't given it this. Like this is the first time this is really
it's just
given me much thought about it. So
okay.
So
this is your first exposure to the idea. Of
I haven't given it this much thought. Like right now, I'm kind of feeling like, man, the Indians technically they lived here. I'm sure there were berry orchards and all kinds of things that were naturally occurring phenomenon that were in fact productive, that not necessarily because they worked them, but because it was a natural effect that I guess they would consider
but taking advantage of natural resources, it doesn't necessarily, it's not the same thing as homesteading. So if there's a patch of wild strawberries and you go and pick those strawberries, that doesn't mean that you're improving the land. But if you go in and you grow strawberries, you grow a strawberry field, and you have worked that land to be more productive than it might have been, just laying fallow or laying,
so
left to its own devices. Enhancement,
is the factor that determines. Chris, I know you had something to add, so please fill in here.
It's not totally relevant, and I was just jumping in to say,
what were you thinking?
Labor knows property. It's kind of the same thing as
Locke.
Yeah, going to fill your pitcher with water from the stream. Only you're working on land. It's a much bigger deal.
And then you have the Wild West. You had the huge feud between ranchers and farmers. You had the ranchers who just run their cattle on the open range to eat the grass that naturally grew there. But as more and more claims sprung up, and these areas became fenced in.
And building the fences,
Yeah.
And then you have what's called the tragedy of the commons.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have, like, the buffalo, nobody owned the buffalo in the Wild West, and so everybody shot and killed and ate the buffalo and used them for their resources because nobody owned that property, nobody looked after that property, nobody made sure that there were enough buffalo, and so everybody used up that resource. Used up all the buffalo resources.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I think that's definitely the most effective way to use and consume goods and get the most productivity out of goods is through individual property rights.
Right.
I'm just wondering if that is enough to justify it. Like, I feel like it's a little bit of a practical decision, not necessarily an intellectually pure decision.
And that's generally where you disconnect from libertarian principles, is if you see that that's not a very practical idea.
Yeah, that's definitely practical.
Yeah, you don't necessarily disagree with the idea, you just don't find it all that practical.
Yeah, it's the most practical way to deal with it is individual property rights.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if necessarily mixing your labor with unenhanced or underutilized...
it's not necessarily underutilized is folded in that. We're talking about like just virgin resource, something that's been untapped or it's been abandoned, you know.
So like when Elon Musk, if he goes to Mars, have you been following that at all? Like he's trying to go to Mars before 2080.
Is this SpaceX?
Yeah, the guy that owns SpaceX. He really wants to die on Mars in a colony. Mm-hmm. So when he goes to Mars, how much can he own?
Whatever he improves, theoretically. I mean, if he somehow terraforms the planet so that the whole place is livable on its own, and he does that with no external help, conceivably he owns the planet. But if he just goes and lands a couple of pods and makes an indoor city that he can live in, he would own that indoor city.
That's all he can rightfully claim.
Yeah.
Right. He had to make the effort to get there and then had to have the resources to improve that area. And so what he has the resources to improve, he can claim.
And then there's always these scams that pop up, like buy a star, or buy land on the moon, or whatever, and you know that's complete. You know,
perhaps we should get into that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, maybe my physics teacher had an idea where you can name a number after somebody, and there's an infinite number of numbers. So
price would be pretty low.
I mean, you could price it higher, you know. Because you're the only one who has the certificates.
That's right. All right. So any more on property rights and the Pilgrims and the Thanksgivings and the Indians?
No. I look forward to investigating this more. This is interesting.
Yeah. If you want to know more, actually the best place to go, Greg Lenz, to work out some ideas is Libertarianism.com.
Oh, I was hoping there was a local library or something.
No.
At your public library.
No, not your public library, because that's publicly owned. You need a private library.
You know, if they accept federal funds, you can look at porn and they can't stop you.
Really?
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill Clinton.
No, but they can use it to discredit you should you ever come out against the government. I don't know if you guys saw that story this week.
That's only the Patriot Act.
So, yeah, go to Libertarianism.com, and Step 2 deals with property rights, and there's a great video that really walks you through the concept of property rights and homesteading. So check that out at Libertarianism.com. All right, so let's talk briefly about Iran. Fill us in on what the Iran deal is all about, Greg.
Well, there is the United States, essentially the Security Council, the United Nations, plus Germany. It's an agreement. It's a joint venture plan between the 5 voting members of the Security Council and Germany. And it was brokered by the head of Oman. I think it's Oman. Mm-hmm. Oman, who is really an irrelevant man globally, but for whatever reason, he reached out to both sides and decided to negotiate this and bring them together. And what it is in exchange for slowing down nuclear production in the facilities that are the closest to having military capability for nuclear warheads, which they're really not terribly close.
Right.
And then on top of, and if they agree to do it and agree to have UN inspectors come in there, they will in exchange will lessen the sanctions. Because Iran has about $100 billion globally that is tied up that they can't access, that belongs to them. Now, they'll get about 6 to 7 of that back by agreeing to these short-term reforms. And I don't know that it's really a good first step, because I don't know how forthcoming they're going to be in letting people come in. And from everything I've read, it doesn't seem like they're even remotely close to getting the bomb.
Yeah, maybe it's a good strategy to kind of tip their hand to see where they are at in the process. But the current prime minister, one of his claims to fame is he was the negotiator with the Europeans a few years ago on the nuclear deal that was agreed to upon them. And part of the reason he's popular is that he went out and bragged about how he screwed the Europeans, and as they were coming to these agreements, that he was the one who got the Europeans to agree to lift the sanctions while they continued to accelerate their nuclear program. So while this is... I'm for anything that keeps peace, because I don't want to see a war. I don't agree with sanctions. I think they're acts of war themselves. And I think the more economic prosperity is what's going to lift Iran up and make sure that they continue down a road that is peaceful, because nobody wants a war, because war destroys economic interests and it destroys abundance. And as we talked about earlier, abundance is what creates that harmony amongst people. So sanctions really hurt in the long run, but I don't think for 1 second that this is actually going to deter the Iranians from pursuing a nuclear weapon of any sort.
No, and who can say whether you're allowed to develop a nuclear weapon or not? That's the thing I struggle with.
Why is it that the international community thinks it's okay for the United States to have them or Russia to have them, and not Iran? Why is it?
It all comes down to force. I mean, who's going to stop the United States from having a nuclear bomb?
Exactly right.
But the thing is, people underestimate how expensive a nuclear bomb is.
Right.
The facility that made Little Boy in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, that was the largest building ever made.
Really?
Yes, just to refine the uranium, the U-235 out of the uranium ore. Wow. And a lot of people thought it was just some sort of government stimulus program, because thousands upon thousands of tons of earth was moved into the facility, and they didn't seem to be making any product. So a lot of people thought it was just they were, digging ditches and filling them back up there, and it just they were just a factory worker that, was getting paid a government salary.
Right.
But the thing is, a significant portion of our national debt comes from just making these bombs, according to my nuclear engineering professor.
However, the economic benefits of us ending World War II through the use of the bomb and then our continued dominance globally, could it be argued that the cost was more than offset?
Well, I'm saying this from the perspective of the big reason we don't have to worry about private companies coming up with these things or terrorists coming up with these things is because these things are not easy to manufacture. If a business is going to sink this much money into the manufacture or something like this, they better have an economic use for it, or they will be ruined. And that's why
you can always sell it.
Who's going to buy it though?
Iran.
I mean,
that's the funny thing though. Like, Iran gets misrepresented a lot. They are a Shia country, so they are not of the mindset of like Al Qaeda and the very fundamental sects of Sunni Islam that are actively trying to bring about the end of the world. Iran has got an incredibly well-educated middle class. They have one of the largest middle classes of any Middle Eastern country, even with the horrible sanctions we have on them. And except for their leadership, the imams that really control whoever's elected president, they're 12ers and they have that same belief. But outside of that, it's not a very common belief in that entire country.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it's very unlikely that Iran has nuclear weapon capabilities. I mean, the fact that we are unsure rather than absolutely sure that it is leads me to believe that they don't have it, because these facilities are very difficult to hide. These things give off radiation that can be seen by satellites that are orbiting well above their airspace. You could use forensic accounting any forensic accountant would be able to tell the difference between plutonium that's only reactor grade versus the cost of plutonium that is
forensic accountant.
A forensic? You've never heard of forensic accountants?
That is
a funny term.
That is one of the most hot, in-demand careers around.
Well, if the Canadians and the world community told America that they couldn't have nuclear bombs, we'd reverse the course of stopping the building of bombs and start making them like crazy. Like, I think there's a lot of the talk. It's really good when the international community lines up and starts pointing fingers at you as leadership and says you're bad and you should stop doing this, and your country, by and large, according to polling, feels like it's bullied by the international community. As a politician in that nation, it makes you look really good when you stand up to the bullies, mean, that's why Chavez was so popular with the underclass and some of the middle class in his country, is because he stood up to the United States and the IMF and the World Bank and said, you know what, we're Venezuelans. We should be proud to be Venezuelans, and we're not going to be pushed around by the West and these international monetary influences anymore. And that's why most of South America has these radical leaders, and same in the Middle East. So, Saddam Hussein was popular with some people for that reason, and we create a foil for these people, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so they may not even have the intention of ever really actually building one. They may, go through the dog and pony show of building it, but because like Dan says, it's very expensive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the price difference between, uranium you'd use in a bomb and a uranium you'd use in a reactor. I mean, the uranium you'd use in a bomb would cost billions to manufacture, while uranium that can be used in a Canadian reactor, they use natural uranium that they pull out of the ground. They
mine.
Yeah, it's very low grade, but they can still use it to generate electricity.
Of course, it's poor grade. It's Canadian.
It's
Canadian
there's an advantage to that. It won't. It's very hard for a reactor like that to melt down.
What's the price difference?
The price difference is that kind of uranium is $36.25 a pound.
Right.
And you only need a few pounds to run a reactor for a year.
Right.
So you're spending like $200 on, fuel for the year for a reactor versus billions for a ballistic missile.
I understand difference. Why there is they want to dissuade Iran from building a nuclear bomb, given the fact that they are major funders of terrorism, especially against Israel. Hezbollah. They're, and across the region, they are, that government especially is major funder of terrorism. So it stands to reason that, if they had nuclear materials that could create a dirty bomb, excuse me, I'm trying not to yawn, then they would maybe use that against Israel or some other, the United States or something. But
yeah, dirty bombs are definitely a different story.
Right,
Those
but
are easy to make.
Right. So the likelihood of that versus, it's just sort of, is that fear-mongering or is that a likely scenario? Who knows? I mean, it's really tough for us to tell because we're surrounded by American media.
Well, one thing about a dirty bomb is, it gives off a lot of radiation even before it's deployed. So
right.
It's not exactly a hard thing to spot.
Right.
If you another thing about a dirty bomb is people who are trying to employ it are going to come down with radiation sickness, which is going to be very sudden. It's going to be very mysterious. It's going to be something that people notice, especially if these are terrorists that try to blend in with society by having normal jobs and families and whatnot.
So, all right, Iran, these deals. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I mean, it's funny though. Like the real player in all this is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the preeminent Arabian country with the most influence in that area. They are the ones everything's brokered through, everything runs through. And I'm wondering if a big part of this isn't because Saudi Arabia, they are very much against this. They are against this joint venture, this plan. And they want to be seen as the United, even though they fund terrorism too, they want to be seen as the person with the ear of the United States, and the United States sees as the person who can enforce order and control in that area. And they don't like this at all because realistically, the United States and Iran should not be enemies.
Right.
They are probably the most ancient people. They are incredibly well educated. They are incredibly smart. It's a beautiful country.
Much more progressive attitudes towards women.
Yeah, until we went in and propped up the Shah.
Right.
I mean, there's no reason on earth we shouldn't get along. And then Israel comes out and says this is a historic mistake. We're not ruling out any of our options. When if you look at Israel's capabilities, the two facilities in Iran that are the closest to developing it are QOM, and then the other one is the one they invited inspectors to that begins with an A that I can't pronounce. And they're so far underground and underneath shale rock beds. Israel, we won't sell Israel the bunker busters that would be able to hit them. So Israel right now, I mean, unless they're going to go strike the facilities that are not even close to operational, they don't have much of a card to play right now.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to our final segment. Let's talk about what you didn't get a chance to discuss the rest of the time. Get on your soapbox, Dan Peffers.
I got to start.
Yep. We can go to Greg first if you'd like.
You have to.
No, that's right. You're getting punished, sir. Anything you'd like to rant about here at the end of the show?
No, I feel like I can get my thoughts out pretty well.
All right.
Gina's not here, so.
Greg Lenz?
There's going to be serious consequences for that comment.
There will be. There will be blood.
I don't know if you guys have been following this. Hobby Lobby is embroiled in a Supreme Court or case that's headed to the Supreme Court on the mandate that they provide contraception in their healthcare plans.
Huh.
And a lot of people are talking about this is Justice Roberts' second crack at Obamacare. And from what I've read, I don't see how the Supreme Court doesn't rule in favor of Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, there's no way that it would be unbelievable if they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We've been saying there's no way this legislation will get this far. There's no way that the Supreme Court... And it's somehow it keeps making it through.
Yeah.
Even when it shouldn't.
Well,
it shouldn't have several times.
Everything that's being done right now, as far as the delays, as far as changing... For instance, there's a new regulation that says... There was a huge giveaway this week to the health insurance companies. If you were watching this closely, the healthcare law stipulates that up to $60,000 in costs for someone that's on Medicaid or Medicare, they will cover that cost, or $45,000, and then they extended that up to $60,000 this week in order to reimburse them in the hospital, and then change the health insurance companies. And so they're saying that would make the expenses of this go up about another 2.6 billion a year.
Of course.
And I think Justice Roberts wants another crack at this.
He has to. So that leads into I'll go last. Chris Peffers, anything you'd like to add?
Well, to keep up the theme of letting you guys know what TV you should be watching, there's a great episode of Raising Hope called Burt Bucks, where everyone in town makes this like little mini economy, originally based off of bartering. But then they add currency to it, and then it just becomes like this whole lesson in inflation.
Cool.
And it's a really cool episode for any libertarians out there.
That was Raising Hope?
Raising Hope. Episode's called Burt Bucks, currently on Hulu.
Cool. Also, Person of Interest, the last 3 episodes especially.
I like Person of Interest.
Some of the best action I've ever seen in a TV or a movie. I mean, it's such a good show.
I've only seen like the first season, but I was really impressed.
Yeah,
got to get on the rest of that show.
It's gotten infinitely better as the series has gone on. So, Forbes, I'm not much of an impeachment person, but I think it's really interesting that Forbes published an article calling for the impeachment of Barack Obama.
Really? Forbes?
Forbes magazine, yeah. So
it is becoming very common. I mean, it's past the wacko phase.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I mean it's
no kidding.
And a lot of it stems around the changes made under Obamacare and how there's just all these different ignoring of laws and the way that the government functions. And if they don't, the essential theme of the article was if you don't impeach Barack Obama, you've killed the republic. Because the republic ends with Barack Obama, because he has been so willing to ignore the Constitution at every turn, and the way that the Constitution has the flow of power, it means the end of the republic.
Okay, so they're making the argument that if Obama is not punished for circumnavigating the Constitution, then the future presidents will just simply act as kings.
Will just continue to act in a way that, you force through a law like Obamacare that gives you imperial powers over 24% of the economy, and then you can change things as you see fit without any check and balance from any of the other branches of government. That ground is grounds for impeachment. So,
perfect example. This week I was going to price out health insurance for my small business, like for my employees.
Right.
Delayed a year. No legislation's passed. No legislation was passed. They just decided to delay it a year.
Right. Yeah.
How does that work?
Well...
Exactly right, Dan. Okay,
Is there a healthcare czar that I don't know about? Like somewhere that's,
maybe we just have a czar now.
What about
Just like
I think you're underestimating the healthcare gods. I think, and the role they're playing.
Did you light a candle to the healthcare gods?
What offering did you give them?
Right.
I didn't give them any offering.
Yeah, that's the problem.
There you go, buddy.
It's your fault.
Yeah, you got to respect the healthcare gods.
Are you touching yourself at night? Because that's the problem.
What?
The gods hate that.
Apparently, he was one of the first people that came to the United States. He was one of the Plymouth Rock people.
Yeah. Apparently, the healthcare gods hate prostate health.
Yeah.
So, all right. So
works for Kellogg's too.
Thank you all for joining us for this episode of We're Libertarians. In December, we typically do less episodes because it gets harder to get together. The news really starts to slow down. But
who really pays attention to politics in December?
Exactly. But we will have an episode or two in December, and we are excited because our good buddy Creighton is returning from Washington, D.C.
Prodigal son.
Yeah, so it's going to be basically just me, Greg, and Creighton on those because, trust me, if Creighton and the brothers Peffers are on the same podcast, this thing will implode.
Oh, I will take on Creighton.
I will take on Creighton.
I will sit here and casually
you don't understand.
Poke jabs at him.
You will not have the opportunity to speak while Creighton is on the podcast.
Oh, he will be taking a lot of Republican jokes.
No, so we're really excited to have Creighton coming back and joining us. He works for Young Americans for Liberty out in Washington, D.C.
I mean, he even looks like a politician.
He's starting to get that Republican face.
Oh,
he's always had
He's always wearing
slicked
suits.
hair, though.
Yeah.
Made him look
What is
like
a Republican face?
Oh, you've got it.
He has a Republican
Every time you
face.
see a poor person, it just puckers. Until you see a big
I'm not
bag
shocked you're the only one who didn't know what Republican face
I
was.
had no idea there's actually a Republican face.
There's a
Yeah.
Republican
there
face.
totally is a Republican face.
Usually has a little bit of white under the nostrils from all the cocaine.
No, that's Toronto Mayor.
Oh, I'm sure he'd be a Republican if he were in the
it could
United
be
States.
80s Republican.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, they haven't changed their
Reaganomics
stripes.
Lamborghini.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us. So we will we'll see you when we see you. Maybe next week, maybe the week after that. But until the next time, we will be contemplating on how to
do better next time.
Music for We Are Libertarians is provided by Hoosier musician Brian Keith Wallen. Please check out his website, briankeithwallen.com. The song is Bad Spell.